Defense pick up one touchdown. Kick game pick up one touchdown. We got this game won.
Welcome back to Scuchdown Report, an all-inclusive deep dive into the inner workings of the Chase Estates Fantasy Football League. I'm your host, Austin, aka A-Dub, and today it's just me. I do not have any special guests. I don't have anything to highlight or to clap about. However, I do want to give a special shout out to Nugget's hairline recently because it is looking pretty good. I won't bore you guys with too much extra talk. Let's get these headphones on and let's talk fantasy football. Let's get into what we're going to be talking about this week, starting with our reactions to week 2. We're going to go through every single game and give my recap of what I think happened, what I think didn't happen. Of course, there's going to be dudes that are dudes there. We're going to be looking at the always ever-present Jabroni Watch. And then we're going to get into weekly MVPs. We're going to take a look at who was at the top of their game at every position group across the league. Next, we're going to get into bench champions. We're going to take a look at who was collecting dust on your bench, who is not helping you win this week, and who, had you started, would have got you that dub. And of course, we will be handing out awards to the best manager of the week and the worst managers of the week. And it wouldn't be a Scuchdown report if we didn't take a look to see how Zach is doing against Nugget, even though they aren't playing each other this week. We'll give a recap of week 2 matchups. We'll see who won, who didn't win, who could have won, who could have lost. And then we'll take a preview at week 3. I want to make an emphasis on this because last week we kind of dusted over the next week's matchups. I'm going to make sure I go through these matchups and see who I like and who I don't like. And without further ado, let's get into our reactions for the week, starting with the Patriots versus the Steelers. All right, I didn't get to watch this game. The Red Zone channel was down for about an hour. And when it did come back up, that was one of the last games I wanted to watch. When it came back up, it was a boring ass game. But I mean, ultimately what we pull from this, right, is that the Pats win and they are back, baby, right? The Pats might be the best team in that division, not named the Bills, Dolphins, or Jets. Some of the highlights from that game, Nelson Agholor led all points with 20, which seems wrong, but I guess Nelson Agholor played really well. Mac Jones fed him the ball. He had one really nice touchdown catch, nice run after catch. You know, he caught it with his back to the end zone and still managed to get in. So nice outing for Nelson Agholor. Pretty much everyone else on that game was a snooze fest. However, there were 2 very important people in this game that I need to make sure that we highlight because every week we're going to be highlighting these 2 players. And those 2 people are Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris. That is right. The Ramondre Stevenson versus Damian Harris update is back and it is going nowhere. So taking a look at what these 2 gentlemen did this week, first let's take a look at Ramondre Stevenson, who had a whopping 9 attempts for 47 yards. He had 1 reception on 2 targets for 4 yards, capping off a beautiful day for Ramondre Stevenson and the Nugget clan. And on the flip side, we have Damian Harris. Damian Harris had 15 attempts for 71 yards on the ground, 1 touchdown rushing. He had 2 receptions for 16 yards on 2 targets for a whopping 15.7 points. Now that takes Damian Harris to 22.5 points on the season. So it's safe to say Zach is winning this battle so far. Damian Harris did get hurt on one of the ending plays in the game. We'll see if he's questionable moving forward. So maybe Ramondre Stevenson takes over that backfield. We will see in week 3 what the Patriots intend to do with their backfield. But up until today, it seems like Damian Harris is the one with the reins. You love to see it. And at one point during that game, they were on the goal line and they quite literally lined up both running backs in like a wishbone, like right next to each other. And I remember watching that being like, this isn't Ramondre Stevenson versus Damian Harris. This is Nugget and Zach in the backfield. Whichever way Mac Jones turns, whether it's right or left, that is who is going to get bragging rights. And my friend, he turned right, handed it to Damian Harris, and Damian Harris takes the second win of the Damian Harris versus Ramondre Stevenson battle. But getting into our second game, Tampa Bay versus New Orleans. This was the game that I watched the most of because Red Zone was down, like I said before, and this was the local game where I live. And it was a boring game up until the 4th quarter. The highlight of this game actually is the Tampa Bay defense. They did extremely good. They were the highest scoring defense and the highest scoring player in this entire game, including running backs, wide receivers, Tom Brady's, everyone. They had 26 points. That was the most points from any player, if you want to call it that, in the entire game. So fun fact, through 2 games, excluding that garbage score by Michael Thomas, the Buccaneers have not allowed a touchdown all year. We'll talk about him later because T-Mac left him on his bench as he tried to play the matchup games with the Jets. But I think moving forward, you just got to start Tampa Bay's defense. I think they're just really good. Great showing for the Tampa Bay defense. The highlight of that game might have been the fight between Mike Evans and Marshawn Lattimore. That was actually a repeat of a few seasons ago when Mike Evans did the same thing to Lattimore. And that time it was ironically for Jameis Winston. I don't know if you guys remember that, but he came off the sideline and kind of gave Lattimore like an elbow. My takeaways from that fight are that don't start some, won't be none. Okay? How is Tom Brady going to start barking at somebody and then get his dogs to come fight for him? Tom Brady better be out there with the fist next time. I don't want to see Tom Brady start no more fights that he's not going to be fighting in. Okay? But overall, a pretty boring game. Jameis Winston threw like 8 interceptions. Okay, Tampa Bay's defense shut them down. Tom Brady didn't do much similar to week 1, but they got the win. Tampa Bay goes 2-0. New Orleans goes 1-1. And the next game was Cincinnati versus Dallas. And a couple of my takeaways from this is, number 1, never bet against Cooper Rush the first game after a Dak injury. He turns into Joe Montana. Tony Pollard was RB3 on the week. Okay, Noah Brown led the Cowboys in fantasy points. Okay? They had 17.8 and 17.6 points respectively. Let that sink in. Tony Pollard and Noah Brown were the highest scores. That was such a terrible game for Cincinnati. Another takeaway from that game I have is the Bengals might be the most overrated team in the league. I saw a tweet the other day that said, Joe Burrow is essentially Jeremy Lin, and his Jeremy Lin run is over. And that rings almost too close to home. And I'll tell you what, his offensive line is not helping him get any better. Joe Burrow is on pace for, let me get this right. Joe Burrow is on pace for 111 sacks this year. That is absurd. Okay, he is getting pulverized in that backfield. Micah Parsons was teeing off on him. Dallas ruined all of my parlays this week. I'm never betting with Dallas ever again or Cincinnati. Joe Burrow won me a lot of money last year getting to the Super Bowl, but I will never bet with him again this year. They don't look like a very good team. Besides Jamar Chase, that whole team looks incredibly average. Hopefully they prove me wrong, but you can't let the Cowboys and Cooper Rush beat you, okay? They are 0-2 and looking to come back strong in week 3. Getting to the next game, I had the Giants versus the Panthers, and this was overall just an ugly game. I mean, anytime you got Daniel Jones facing Baker Mayfield, you're not really looking for the best game of the week, am I right? The highest score in this game was Graham Gano with 17 points. I don't have very many takeaways from this game. Just know Graham Gano had 17 points, and that was the highlight. Saquon had a decent game, pretty average. You know, hopefully he'll have a good season. But the Carolina Panthers and the New York Football Giants put on a stinkfest. Having said that, the Giants go to 2-0. They are at the top of the NFC East, and they look like they are primed for a fall. Getting to the next game, this one hits close to home. It was the Commanders versus the Lions. And like I said last episode, it was a trap. I knew we weren't going to win this game, we being the Commanders, by the way. I knew the Lions were better than everyone says they are. They are not the traditional Lions that just lose all their games, right? They got a couple guys on that team that can go, okay? Started off fast. Their entire defensive line was firing on all cylinders. Amon-Ra St. Brown looked like Calvin Johnson in his prime. Jared Goff looks like what Joe Burrow wish he was at this point. Okay, Jared Goff was just flinging that ball across the field, and we looked like absolute trash. There was a play where DeAndre Swift caught the ball and fell down. There wasn't a Commander within 15 yards of him, and got up and untouched ran into the end zone. It was the most absurd, most frustrating thing as a Washington fan to watch. Like, literally get Jack Del Rio out of that building. All right. I'm sorry, I don't mean to ramble about Commanders. It's going to happen. I get my hopes up every year. The highlights from that game obviously were Amon-Ra Dog, okay? 34.9 points. I think he was wide receiver 3 on the week. And Curtis Samuel, who seems to be the wide receiver 1 in Washington, he had 19.4 points. He had 15 last week. He seems like the safest bet to start out of all 3 of those players. Jahan Dotson had a great game too. He might end up being a guy, honestly. And weirdly enough, Terry McLaurin looks like the odd one out. He had a long bomb in week 1. He had a couple dink and dunk plays in week 2, but ironically, he seems like the least safe play out of all 3 of them, and that feels weird. But overall, great game for the Lions. Glad they got a win. Commanders look like they are the worst team in the league. Side note, Commander Carson leads the NFL in passing touchdowns. Just going to throw that out there. Might be an MVP watch. Getting to the next game, we have Jets versus Cleveland, and this was one for the ages, okay? Nick Chubb led that game with 30.8 points, okay? He had 87 yards and 3 touchdowns, and Kareem Hunt was still elite, okay? They looked like they ran away with the game, but here comes Pretty Flacco, okay? Pretty Flacco was the QB3 on the week, and I pulled a few stats from Google that I need to read because I don't think Joe Flacco is appreciated enough. Joe Flacco owns the Browns, all right? He is 18-3 against the Browns. He has an 89.3 QBR against the Browns. Okay, he had 26.8 points in this game. He threw for 307 yards and 4 touchdowns. And my biggest takeaway from this game is I don't even know if I want Zach Wilson back. The Jets have 2 really good wide receivers in Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson. Both of them look like they are perfectly fine. They just need someone to get them the ball. Granted, I haven't seen Zach Wilson play with them, but Pretty Joe Flacco is out there slinging that pill, okay? I'm interested to see what happens with Zach Wilson. Does their stock rise or does their stock drop? Excellent win for the Jets, Jets. Cleveland even had a good game. They just lost. They just did Cleveland Browns things. Like, they look like the Commanders out there. Excellent win for the Jets overall. Really good game. So the next game was Miami versus Baltimore, and this was also probably one of the best games of the week, okay? The quarterbacks in this game absolutely popped off, okay? Lamar Jackson had 42.5 points, okay? They looked like they had run away with this game. Lamar Jackson had, I think, over 100 yards rushing. If your running back gets over 100 yards rushing, you're excited. He had over 300 yards passing. If your quarterback gets over 300 yards passing, you are to the moon. He did both of those and still lost the game. He was still outshined by young Tua. I've been rough on Tua these past couple episodes. I still think he stinks, if I'm being honest with you guys. But he had 38.7 points. The Dolphins broke a record this game. This was the first game in NFL history where 2 wide receivers on the same team had 150 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. The dangerous part about this is now we see Tua's ceiling. I do think this is the ceiling for him. I don't think it gets much better than this, but now people are going to chase this in fantasy, and I feel like people are always going to be disappointed when he throws for 125 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Big takeaway from this is pay Lamar Jackson. Good wide receivers make good quarterbacks. I truly don't believe Tua is that good. He had a great game. We'll see how the season pans out, okay? But I am dying on the hill that Tua is not a great quarterback. Overall, though, great game. Came down to the wire. Terrible defense from both sides, but Miami ended up getting the win. The next game, absolute stink fest, okay? We have the Colts versus the Jaguars. I have a couple takeaways from this. The first takeaway is the Jags actually may be really good. I remember when I looked at the schedule for the Commanders, our first opening 2 games was the Jaguars and the Lions, and I said to myself, oh man, we are going to start the season 2-0. And in all reality, I think those 2 games were trap games. I think both of those teams are good. I think we forgot how good Trevor Lawrence is. I think Trevor Lawrence is decent, and I think we forgot that the Jaguars have had either the first, second, or third pick for the past 6 years, okay? They have guys all over that field that are good. And on the flip side, the Colts really might not be that good, and Matt Ryan definitely is not that good. He couldn't win a Super Bowl with the Atlanta Falcons. They ship him off to Indianapolis, and all of a sudden everyone thinks he's going to be the second coming of Peyton Manning, and he looks like Baker Mayfield. He didn't have his number 1 target in Michael Pittman, but that's no excuse to get goose-egged by Jacksonville, okay? The leading scorer in that game was Christian Kirk, who is proving to be the wide receiver number 1 in Jacksonville. He had 22.8 points and is looking deserving of all that money they gave him. I know everyone gave him a question mark, but he looks like he is the wide receiver 1 there. And just so I can make fun of the Colts, does everyone know who the Colts' top scorer was this past week? $5 if you guessed it was Andre Doolin. No shade to Andre Doolin. Congratulations, man. I hope you have a great rest of your season. But did anyone have Andre Doolin on their Jeopardy board for number 1 point scorer for the Colts? What a fart they put out there, dude. Next game we're getting into was the 49ers versus Seattle. And firstly, I just got to say, moment of silence for Trey Lance. I wish him a safe recovery. I wish him a speedy recovery. But his career now looks like Teddy Two Gloves to me. I said it at the beginning of the year. No one could have predicted him getting hurt. But even before he got hurt, he looked like Joe Average, all right? Jimmy G comes in, he gets 16.5 points, and he has got the Niners back, and they are going to make the playoffs. And everyone in the 49ers offense is going to benefit, especially Brandon Ayuk, especially Deebo Samuel, now that they are not just going to be glorified running backs. I hope Trey Lance gets better. At least now no one will have the temptation to start him. I hope he gets back soon next year. And who knows? Maybe he ends up on my Washington team and all of a sudden I have to eat crow. But for right now, I'm excited for Jimmy G. I'm excited for what he does for everyone on that offense. I want to congratulate whoever won the Jeff Wilson Jr. Sweepstakes on the waiver wire. You now have the backup running back in San Francisco. It was evident that Kyle Shanahan doesn't know what the hell he wants to do in that backfield, and I am staying away from anything running back in San Francisco whose name doesn't rhyme with Schlebo. But overall, a pretty bland game. I mean, it was supposed to rain a whole bunch. It didn't. 49ers win. Next game was Rams versus Falcons, and this game was closer than it needed to be, okay? Biggest takeaways from this game is the Rams look beatable. They lost to the Bills, but everyone's going to lose to the Bills this year. But they almost lost to the Falcons. Drake London is getting fed in Atlanta, okay? He had 19.6 points. He had 8 catches on 12 targets for 86 yards and a touchdown. He looks like he's going to be a guy, but the Rams almost lost to this team. Like always, Cooper Kupp led with 26.3 points. Some kind of way he's going to get his money. But the Rams just look like they lost that spark. They don't look like a championship team at this point. Maybe they get there eventually, but right now like they look like they have Super Bowl hangover. I want to shout out Allen Robinson. He did get some love. There was a play where they took a touchdown away from him, which I thought was absolute BS. They like threw the ball to him. Like everyone played the play. He scored a touchdown, and then all of a sudden they blew the whistle, and they were like, oh, I in the sky said someone looked like they were woozy. They reran the play back, and then they threw the ball to Cooper Kupp. And I thought that was complete BS. If you have Allen Robinson, I'm sorry for you. He looks like he's going to be a guy, but Cooper Kupp's going to get fed either way. So next game we have is a Texans versus Broncos, and this was a stink fest as well. Okay, Russell Wilson stinks. Russell Wilson absolutely stinks. He is not a top 10 quarterback anymore. Get him off my team. If anyone wants to trade for him, I will let him cook in your restaurant. But as of right now, restaurant's closed. Get Chef Russ off this team. He looks like he is taking farts in his pants the whole game. Another takeaway I have from this is always bet with Dougie Dallas and the Texans, okay? I think they've covered the past 4 or 5 games. Cooper Rush and Dougie Dallas are going to mess up your bets. However, Cortland Sutton did have a great game. He led with 16.2 points. I know Jerry Jeudy got a little banged up in that game. Hopefully he comes back, but Cortland Sutton looks like he's going to be the guy. And let me tell you something. My team is built around the Denver Broncos offense, and right now, my point total reflects that. Russell Wilson looks like he needs to retire. All right, I'm going to stop talking about Russell Wilson after this, but oh my God, he stinks. Okay, the next game I have is the Raiders versus Cardinals, and this was a game, okay? Obviously, you know I live here in Las Vegas. I actually had to drive someone to the Strip after this game, and the Raiders fans looked absolutely distraught, okay? They were in single file line, heads down, shaven heads, jean shorts, all looking depressed, dude. It was a bad sight. Never trust the Raiders, okay? Derek Carr's not that good, okay? Yeah, they got a new shiny new stadium. They're from Las Vegas, but, you know, I'm sorry, Jim. I'm sorry, Kyle. It's just, it's not fun. Coming from a Washington Commanders fan, I mean, just lower your expectations, okay? You made the playoffs last year. Be happy with that. The Raiders look like, if you can't beat the Cardinals, who I think are terrible, it's not your year in one of the hardest divisions. Let's be real. Couple of other takeaways. Kyler Murray is very fast. He is also the best running back, wide receiver, and tight end on the Cardinals. I mean, there was a play where he might have ran 150 yards to go 2 yards for a 2-point conversion, and it looked like everyone else was playing JV football, and he was the only varsity player on there. He is incredibly good at anything that involves being athletic, football being one of those things. What a game for him. What a win for the Cardinals. Kyler Murray had 23.8 points and a well-deserved win for the Arizona Cardinals. He was the points leader in that game. But what a game. Next, we got to Sunday Night Football. That was the Bears versus Packers, and I was wrong about Aaron Jones. I'll eat crow, okay? Aaron Jones is the reason I lost this week. He had 30.5 points and 2 touchdowns. He absolutely ate. Brandon also combined Aaron Rodgers to beat me, okay, with that little bullshit touch pass that Geno Smith got so good at West Virginia. I don't know if I'm showing my age, but that touch pass was the reason I lost this week. I would like to point that out. That is not a pass, that's a run. However, the Packers win a must-win game. The Bears also stink. Okay, get the Bears out of here. They threw the ball 11 times. That is a recipe for disaster. They are trash, okay? Get some talent in there. Justin Fields needs help, okay? He could be a guy, but the Bears absolutely stink. David Montgomery's not that bad. I'll throw that out there. He looked very good. But besides him, they stink. And then getting to the Monday night games, I actually don't have any notes written down for these. I just finished watching this. I'm recording this on Monday night after those games. And the first game we have was the Bills versus the Titans. And I went into this game thinking this could be a game. You know, I know the Bills are good, but this could be a game. The Titans may show something. No. Wrong. The Bills are the best team in NFL history. They put up 41 on the Titans. Are we kidding? Are you kidding me? Josh Allen is the next coming of Peyton Manning. Combined with Tim Tebow, sprinkle in a little bit of RG3. He is looking like he is going to win the MVP this year. Hands down, dude. Him and Stephon Diggs ran an absolute train on the Titans secondary. I turned that game off halfway through. They had their backups in. I mean, it got that bad. The Bills are on a mission. Second game was also kind of a stink fest, okay? It was the Eagles versus the Vikings. And so after week one, I said the Vikings look different. The Vikings look like they are ready to make a run this year. You know, Justin Jefferson looks good. Their whole team looks refreshed. No. Kirk Cousins is who we thought he was. Primetime Kirk is one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. Get him out of here. Justin Jefferson was locked up the whole game. Their pass rush was non-existent. Jalen Hurts looks like he's that guy. So in one of my other leagues, I was playing against Jalen Hurts. It was the last player that my opponent had, and he needed 42 points to win that game. And it was hard not to be afraid every Eagles possession because Jalen Hurts looked like he was about to dump 60 points on me. He ran for a touchdown. He threw for a touchdown. He did everything but throw the ball to A.J. Brown, which would have got me the win, but I'm not salty. Either way, the Eagles look like they're the best team in the NFC East, hands down. They go to 2-0. They look like they're going to be really good this week. They got the Commanders coming to town next week. We are going to get absolutely blacked on that field, okay? Mark it down. Low expectations for the Commanders. Don't embarrass yourselves and make it out of there alive. Okay, so moving on. We had the weekly MVPs for the week. And this was a great week. Running backs kind of took a dump, but the top two running backs were decent. So starting off with our quarterback, we have Lamar Jackson. We spoke about him earlier. He had 42.5 points. He had 318 yards passing with 3 touchdowns, okay? He had 119 yards rushing and a touchdown. Wonderful performance from Lamar Jackson. Pay that man. QB1 for the week. So our RB1 for the week was Nick Chubb. He had 30.5 points on 17 attempts. He had 87 yards on the ground for 3 touchdowns, and he also had 3 receptions on 26 yards. And that's impressive because Kareem Hunt had a great game too, but Nick Chubb still ended up as RB1. I'm going to die on the hill that I don't think this is sustainable all season, but so far Nick Chubb has shown that he is by far the best pure running back in the NFL through week 2. Great week for him. Getting to our RB2, and I'm not salty at all, but Aaron Jones had 30.5 points on 15 attempts, 132 yards, and a touchdown. He had 3 receptions for 38 yards and a receiving touchdown on a touch pass. Great week for Aaron Jones. Terrible week for A.J. Dillon. I'm not salty in the slightest. Very happy for you, man. Congratulations. Getting into our wide receiver 1, it was Stephon Diggs on Monday night. He had 38.8 points, 12 receptions, 148 yards, 3 touchdowns, 14 targets, 3 bodies, and 4 sons. Great game for Stephon Diggs. He is out there balling. And then getting into our wide receiver 2, we have Tyreek Hill. He also had an amazing game. He was a beneficiary of terrible defense, as was Stephon Diggs. But Tyreek Hill had 36.5 points on 11 receptions, 13 targets for 190 yards receiving, and 2 touchdowns. Great game for the Cheetah. Shout out to our flex position MVP. It is Amon-Ra St. Brown. He had 34.9 points on 9 receptions. He had 12 targets, 116 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also had 2 rushes for 68 yards. And I want to congratulate him for potentially getting Jack Del Rio fired and initiating a change in the Commanders' defense. Great job. Love you, Amon-Ra. So getting into the tight end 1, we had Mark Andrews with 21.9 points. He had 9 receptions on 11 targets for 104 yards and 1 touchdown. He was one of many beneficiaries of Lamar Jackson's QB1 performance. Shout out to my keeper, Mark Andrews. The defense for the week we mentioned earlier was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. They had 26 points. I want to read off this stat line because they had a day. 10 points allowed, 3 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries, 6 sacks, and 1 touchdown on an interception. Great game. I know T-Mac had him on his bench. Hopefully he starts them moving forward because they look like they might be the best defense in the league outside of maybe the Bills. The best striker of the week, a.k.a. the best kicker, goes to Graham Goodnow of the New York Giants with 17 points. He had 17 points on 4 field goals made and 1 extra point. No one cares. Congratulations, Graham. And that leads us to our bench champions. Last week I left some people out, so I'm going to change the format this week. I'm not going to base it off of who you could have started that would have given you the most points. I'm just going to highlight the people that were on the bench that had a lot of points. Because last week, Colton called me out and said that Robbie Anderson had a great week on the bench, and he was right. And the only reason I didn't put him was because I don't think Colton had a spot to put him in. However, moving forward, we're starting to start off with Matty Will. Matty Will had Garrett Wilson on his bench, who had 26 points. He had 8 receptions for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. I don't know if that's someone who starts every week, but something to think about. He had a great week. Matty Will also had Trevor Lawrence on his bench, who had 18 points. He started Tom Brady, who had 9.4 points. And Tom Brady doesn't look like Tom Brady from before, and Trevor Lawrence looks like he's going places. Mike had Tua on his bench, which was 38.7 points. I had to point this out. Mike also had Lamar Jackson on his team, so he had QB1 and 2 in this game. Clearly, he made the right choice. I don't think he ever pivots away from Lamar Jackson. At this point, he just plays keep away and doesn't give anyone Tua. Spoiler alert, keep him away from my team. Anyways, Mike. Next we have T-Mac. And T-Mac, we talked about it before. He had Tampa Bay defense on his bench. He started Cleveland, who got 0. They were playing the Jets, so I'm sure Tom thought that the Jets were going to throw up a goose egg, and of course they didn't. It was the other team that fell through. Maybe moving forward, he always starts Tampa Bay. We'll see how that goes, but I don't think anyone saw that coming. So next we have Dan, and Dan had Tyler Lockett and Jahan Dotson on his bench. They had 15 points. Both of them had 15 points. He started Jamar Chase and Deontay Johnson. I don't think Mitch Trubisky is going to help Deontay Johnson that much. Jahan Dotson looks like he's going to be a beneficiary of the Commanders being behind every game and them needing to throw. So I think maybe he looks to start Jahan moving forward. Tyler Lockett's a wash, but maybe he starts Deontay. Up to him, really. Next, we're going to get into Zach, and Zach had none other than Damian Harris on the bench with 15.7 points to Michael Carter's 7.5. Interesting decision there. Damian Harris looks to be a little banged up, so maybe he continues to go with Michael Carter, but maybe when Damian Harris is back, Zach starts that top 12 back every week. Next from there, we have Jim. Jim had Amari Cooper on the bench with 20.6 points. I don't think anyone saw Jacoby Brissett supporting a wide receiver 1. I think this is a one-off for Amari Cooper. I think you really just got to wait until Deshaun comes back. He did play him over T. Higgins and Michael Thomas, which I'm okay with both of those starts, but something to point out. Next, we have Kyle, and Kyle had Christian Kirk on his bench with 22.8 points and 2 touchdowns. He started him over CeeDee Lamb and Terry McLaurin. He also had Jeff Wilson at his flex. I don't know if he makes that mistake moving forward. I wouldn't necessarily even call it a mistake. I think Christian Kirk has proven that he's going to be wide receiver 1 over there, and Jeff Wilson just looks like he might not have been the best pickup. CeeDee Lamb, it's a toss-up. You never really know. McLaurin's kind of a wash too, but just wanted to highlight Christian Kirk on the bench. I think he should be started moving forward. Special shout out to Colton and Robbie Anderson, who had 2.7 points on his bench this week, proving he should be on the bench, collecting dust. He had a great week last week, though. I want to point that out. He missed bench champions last week. All right, and that brings us to our best and worst managers from the week. I just calculated this, and I had to change all these numbers around, as the Monday night game truly threw everyone's game out of whack. But coming in with the bronze medal this week and the third most points, we have Zach with 130.1 points. So Zach had a tough week. He played Dan, who ended up being one of the better teams. So he lost out even having the third most points. But he had a decent game. Like I said, Nick Chubb had a good game for him. Mike Williams also played really well, got him 21 points. I would like to shout out that his kicker and defense got him 13 and 9 respectively. I hate kickers, but need to shout that out. Decent game overall for him. Zach really leaned into that Las Vegas stack with Derek Carr. and Devontae Adams, and they didn't really pop off the way I don't think he wanted to. But overall, he had a great week, and if Zach would have played everyone but 2 other people, he would have won. So good week overall for Zach. Coming in with the silver medal was Dan. Dan had 135.8 points, and he was the team that beat Zach. I was mentioning Zach was a little unlucky. He lost to Dan this week. Dan had a pretty decent week overall. He had Josh Allen at quarterback, which was the main reason he won on Monday night, but he also had a great showing from DeAndre Swift. And weirdly enough, Darren Waller had more points in that Las Vegas Cardinals game than Devontae Adams did, and I think that was another reason why Dan was able to pull away. Curtis Samuel was a great flex start for him. His kicker and defense had 17 and 12 points. I know Zach pointed that out in the group chat earlier. Clearly, that was the difference maker in why Zach wasn't able to overcome his 135.8 points. But good overall week for Dan. He comes in at second place. And our gold medal and top points for the week goes to Mike, who played in the Collusion Bowl this week against the other Phillips. He put up 146.8 on Nugget's dome piece, okay? He absolutely dunked on Nugget, okay? His team went off on all cylinders. He had Lamar Jackson, who I mentioned before as QB1. He had Tyreek Hill, who was wide receiver 2, I believe. He had a good showing from everyone else, okay? His running backs did solid. His wide receivers did decent. But overall, so shout out to Mike's defense, who had 20 points. That was the Bills. They had 2 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries, 7 points against. They also scored a touchdown. Mike was always going to win this game, but he truly dunked on Nugget. And getting to our worst managers, I'll start off with yours truly. I came in as the 3rd worst manager this week with 98.5 points. Kyle beat me by 0.02 points to get into 4th place, so I narrowly made it out of the bottom 3, but I mentioned earlier that Dan Wagon always had my number. He beat me by 1 point. I said last week he was going to score 100 points, and he scored 99.5. So I know my opponent too well. Tough loss, but 98.5 is what I put up. Just to go over my team real quick, we're going to highlight a few terrible plays. I mentioned earlier that my team ride or dies with the Denver Broncos, and it did just that. Okay, Broncos country did not ride, and Russell Wilson stinks. I'll keep saying it. Get him off my team. Okay, sorry about that. Getting into our 2nd worst team of the week, we had Colton at 94.4. Weirdly enough, Colton actually won this week with the 2nd least points, which should tell you who had the least points this week. So Colton overcame Jerry Jeudy getting 1.7 points and getting hurt. Ezekiel Elliott also had a stink fest at 5.4 points. James Conner had 6.1. He was being held up by Cooper Kupp and Justin Herbert. But overall, a decent game for him. Lower end than he would like to be, but he did end up getting the win, so I can't say too much about it. But 2nd place goes to Colton. And then in our worst manager of the week, effectively, it was T-Mac. T-Mac did lose to Colton. He had 91.7 points. I mean, if the worst team in the league had 91 points, that's a pretty decent week all around. Just to give you perspective, I believe Dan put up 56 last week, and I didn't really highlight that enough. I mentioned that he had a terrible first week and then he was going to dunk on me week 2, which did happen. But T-Mac with 91 points isn't necessarily a bad start. It's just kind of unlucky, really. T-Mac, like I mentioned in week 2, is really going to ride or die by Patrick Mahomes and Jonathan Taylor. And he did just that. Jonathan Taylor only had 6.8 points. He was part of that stink fest in Indianapolis. That didn't help him out at all. Some of his top scorers were Drake London, Patrick Mahomes, David Montgomery also had a good week. But the Browns put up a goose egg for him. I mentioned it before. Tampa Bay would have gave him the win. O.J. Howard put up 1.2. He's struggling to find a tight end over there with Kittle out. But yeah, overall a decent week for him. I'm not going to say it was a bad week. He just got unlucky. He did have the lowest points total of the week, though. So gold medal of the Stinkfest goes to T-Mac. So going over all the week 2 matchups in total, we'll get to the first matchup, which I talked about a few times, but it was myself versus Dan Wagon. And it was a close game. I lost by 1 point. Dan always has my number. I mentioned that he was going to get 100 points. He got 99.5. I got 98.5. You hate to lose that way. But the main reason I lost, I mentioned earlier, was Aaron Jones and Aaron Rodgers. They were his top 2 scorers. Austin Eckler was his 3rd best scorer. But it was really that Green Bay tandem that beat me. My top scorer was actually Mark Andrews. Shout out to my keeper. Cortland Sutton did well as well. Tyler Bass was actually my 3rd best with 12 points. You hate to see it. But overall, good win for Dan. He's going to go to 1-1. I will fall to 1-1. The next matchup we have is Nico versus Matty Will. Nico ended up losing to Matty Will. We mentioned in the group chat that if Matty Will lost to Nico, he would be kicked out of league. That was not the case. I think Nico had about 50 or 60 points going into Monday, So he almost beat Matty Will. A really good showing for him. One of those reasons he almost won with Stephon Diggs, who we mentioned before. He had 38.8 points. He also had Kyler Murray, who had 23.8. DJ Moore was his third best player with 11.8 points. Matty Will had a good showing. Amon-Ra really led the way for him with 34.9 points. Jalen Waddle right behind him with 34.6. Matty Will's third best player was Tom Brady at 9.4 points. So a very top-heavy win for Matty Will. Matty will go to 1-1, and Nico will fall to 1-1. The next game was the Collusion Bowl. Captain Phillips versus Airsoft Thugs. We mentioned before Nugget got dunked on, but in all honesty, Mike would have dunked on predominantly everyone in the league. 146 for him. Lamar Jackson was his main scorer, with Tyreek Hill second with 36.5. Buffalo Bills was his third highest scoring player. So good overall showing for Mike. Nugget, interestingly enough, his number one scorer was Carson Wentz. Great start for Nugget. I have to shout him out there. Rashad Bateman also got him 18.8 points. And shout out to Tony Pollard with 17.8 points as Nuggets' third highest scorer. Single-handedly breaking the over-under on Nuggets running backs getting over 10 points. Congratulations. We will follow that trend closely in week 3 to see if Nugget can continue to put out solid running back pairings. But Mike will go to 2-0 and be undefeated. Nugget will fall to 0-2. Next week he plays Matty Will. We will follow that very closely to see if Nugget gets buried to 0-3. The next game was T-Mac versus Colton. So we mentioned before, Tom lost by 3 points. It was incredibly close. Both of these two teams were the two lowest scoring teams in the entire league. So very unlucky for T-Mac to lose. Very lucky for Colton to win. I guess you could look at it either way. But just to highlight some performances here, T-Mac's highest scorer was Drake London with 19.6. Mahomes had 17. And James Robinson had 14. Solid top 3 there. I think T-Mac really lost out there with his running backs. And then Colton, Cooper Kupp led the way with 26 points. Justin Herbert had 23 points. His kicker, Evan Money McPherson, had 13 points for him and might have been the difference maker there. Taking Colton to 1-1, moving into week 3, and T-Mac will go to 0-2. I think he has a solid enough team. I don't think that's going to be the worst for him, but he is in poor company with Nugget at that 0-2 spot. The next game was Zach versus Dan. We talked about this before. 2 of the 3 highest scorers. Zach had 130. Dan had 135. Zach really lost this game on Monday night, which you hate to see. So Zach's top scorer was Nick Chubb, running back 1 on the week. Mike Williams had a great week for him as well with 21 points. Derek Carr had 18 points. A good start for Zach, really. Derek Carr, that is. 130 for Zach. Unlucky to lose. He will go to 1-1. He won on Monday night with Josh Allen. He also had Curtis Samuel, who had 19 points. Graham Gano had 17 points. Zach was a little bit heated about that defense kicker situation for Dan. With Graham Gano, kicker number 1 and best striker in the league, gets 17 points. Takes Zach to 1-1 and takes Dan to 2-0. He is in good company with Mike. Getting into the last game, we have Jim versus Kyle. Jim had 100 points to Kyle's 98. Also another great Monday night game. Kyle almost made it back with Jalen Hurts, but just barely didn't make it. I thought Jalen Hurts was going to do it for him. He was on pace to break that all day, but he did not. Jim edged out the victory, though. T. Higgins was his top scorer at 16. Michael Thomas with 15. Christian McCaffrey with 14. So really uniform, well-balanced win for Jim. He'll go to 2-0 with the other 2 perfect teams in the league, and Kyle will fall to 0-2. His top performers were Jalen Hurts. Brandon McManus had 12 points, and CeeDee Lamb had 11.6. So pretty overall great game for him, too. I think Kyle can do well as well, but he is falling into the pits with Nugget and T-Mac right now at 0-2. So great week 2, fellas. Looking into week 3, I want to talk about some week 3 matchups that are intriguing to me. So getting started, we have myself versus Zach. And this is going to be a great game. Zach's an incredibly terrible shit talker, but I'm sure he will try his hardest all week to antagonize me, and he will not. Currently, We have Derek Carr going up against Russell Wilson. I have a strong feeling neither of those two quarterbacks will be there in week 3, but something to look into. Hopefully I get Keenan Allen back this week. Hopefully he gets Chris Godwin back this week. I think that'll be an interesting matchup. We will both be 1-1 and looking to get our second win in that game. The second game I have is Matty Will versus Nugget. This is another cul-de-sac bowl here. Matty Will is going to be starting at 1-1, and Nugget's going to be 0-2, looking for his first win. Matt's going to be looking for his second win. Matty Will has a strong team. I think Nugget's really going to have to fill in some holes to compete with Matty Will here. So currently the line on this game is Matty Will is minus 15.5. If you don't know much about betting, that means Matty Will is supposed to beat Nugget by 15.5 points. I'm sure this will change over the course of the week, but currently Matty Will is a strong favorite to win this game. Let's see if he can follow through. Let's see if Nugget can fill in some points. Key injuries going into week 3 for them. Julio Jones is out for Matty Will. We'll see if he can get back onto the field this week. Nugget is looking for his first start from J.K. Dobbins. Dak Prescott is obviously out for him. We'll see if Carson Wentz is who he continues to go with or if he changes it up there. Also interesting to see if Tony Pollard and Ramondre Stevenson end up as his running backs next week. But overall, a good matchup to look forward to. Another cul-de-sac bowl. So getting into the next game, we have the Barack Obamas versus AS St. Etienne, the battle of the best two names in the league. We have Colton going up against Nico. And right now, the line is set at negative 8.1 to Colton. Colton is the 8-point favorite. So he's favored to win this game right now. He's got a lot of questionable people on his team. Justin Herbert's injured. James Conner's injured. Jerry Jeudy's injured. A lot of question marks on his team. So an interesting line there compared to Nico's team, where the only player questionable is Hunter Renfrow, and the only thing that's broken is his spirits from fumbling twice to lose a game. But I think Nico will have a decent game against him. Both of these teams are going to be 1-1 looking for their second win. This is one of the few games where there aren't a lot of players that are out injured, so I think really it'll be Colton filling in people on the waiver wire for his questionable players. We will follow those injuries along the week, but good matchup over there against the best two names in the league. The next game we have is the Integrity Farm Towels versus Airsoft Thugs. This is going to be Dan versus Mike and the two guys that don't text in the group chat bowl. And this game has a humongous line of 18.3. Dan is the heavy favorite going into this. Both these teams are going to be undefeated going into this game. But Dan is the heavy favorite here. And just taking a look at Dan's team, his team is kind of absurdly good on paper. I mentioned he can fix that Deontay Johnson. Maybe he sticks with Deontay Johnson. What do I know? He's undefeated and I'm not. Mike is going to be looking to replace Mike Evans this week, who was suspended after getting into the fight. Dalton Schultz looks questionable after hurting his knee, I believe. Alvin Kamara was also out this week for Mike. We'll see if he comes back next week. I think that could help him out greatly, not having to start Breece Hall or Antonio Gibson or someone like that, you know. And on Dan's team, Gabe Davis was out this week. Hopefully he gets Gabe Davis back. I don't even know if Gabe Davis makes this starting lineup for him. Maybe he does. We'll see. But currently, Dan is a strong favorite to win this game. We'll see how that goes for the two guys that don't chat in the group chat bowl. The next game is going to be Golden Grinders versus Tennessee State. This is T-Mac versus Kyle. This is a great game as well. Both of these guys are going to be 0-2 going into this. Neither of them are going to want to be 0-3 going into week 4, but inevitably someone will. The line opens up at negative 4.2 for Tom. He is a 4-point favorite in what's projected to be a very close game. T-Mac looks to have the positional advantage pretty much everywhere except for defense and kicker. We will see how that pans out in the game. The only injuries I have for this are George Kittle has been out the first 2 weeks. Elijah Mitchell is obviously on injury reserve for Tom. But I think James Robinson is a great fill-in for him. Drake London's looking like he's going to take a step forward. I'm interested to see who Tom starts at defense and tight end this week. Those were his two decision-making positions the last 2 weeks, so hopefully he makes some good decisions there and gets the win over Kyle. But looking at Kyle's lineup, Kyle has a decent lineup. He just has a lot of players that are middle tier, in my opinion. You know, Josh Jacobs, CeeDee Lamb, Jeff Wilson, just a lot of question marks across the boards. I think boomer bust players. Hopefully he proves me wrong and he gets the win as well. Kyle currently is plus 4.2 against T-Mac going into week 3. And getting to the last game of the week, we have Dan Wagon Fan versus Culpo's second boyfriend. This is Jim versus Dan and the two guys that came from outside the group bowl. And I think it's obvious my favorite here is Jim, seeing as I absolutely despise Dan Wagon Fan. I've never met him in real life, but I hate him in fantasy. So Jim opens up the line at a 6.5 favorite on the week. He has positional advantage at everything except for tight end and the flex position. But I think that's only because Dan Wagon has Aaron Jones in flex. So some key injuries on this team. Jim had Michael Pittman out this week. We'll see if he can get on the field week 3. He does have Trey Lance out. He did have Matthew Stafford as his backup. We'll see if he runs with Stafford moving forward. But besides that, no real big injuries on either team. Both teams look healthy and ready to go for week 3. As always, Dan Wagon will get 30 points this week after putting up 100 on me. It is inevitable, but we will see if he can prove me wrong going into week 3. And Zach, I want to apologize. I didn't put this part for our game, but currently you are opening up as a 3.4 point favorite in our game. That is considered to be an incredibly close line, so they're looking at us as equals. We'll see how that pans out. You have a decent team. I have a decent team. We'll see how it goes. Looking forward to it, as I'm sure you will let me know how things are going every second of the way via text, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. But that is all I have for you guys today. Shorter episode. I didn't have any guests. Thanks for sticking around if you made it the whole way. I will see you in week 4. Sneak preview to next week. I plan for Florida Matt to be here with me. I'm also looking to get Nico in here so we can talk some Chelsea football. I won't bore you guys with football talk now. Just know Chelsea's the best team and Liverpool is trash. That's all I got for you guys. Have a wonderful week. This is the Scuchdown Report. Peace.